If you could just make sure you use your microphone. As you know, our live stream has started and we'll go straight to the emergency procedures on the screen. If you just make sure your mobile phone is on silent mode, or you'll be buying the Christmas cakes for everyone later today. Moving through to our opening karakia. Please feel free to join me. Whakatakata hou ki te uru, whakatakata hou ki te tonga, kia mā kina kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai, e hiaki ana te atakura, he tio, he huka, he hauhu, ti hei moriora. Okay, moving through to apologies. So I've received apologies for lateness from Councillor Barrett and also Councillor Brown. That's everyone. Yep, I'll move that. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Briggs, any discussion? All those in favour say aye. Those against no. Declare that carried. Moving through to public comment. We don't have any members of the public here who wish to speak. So we'll move through to our conflict of interest declarations. Any conflicts to declare from members? No? Okay. Moving through to item 5, which is recommendations to council for immediately after this meeting. And that's item 5A, which is the draft annual plan, financial aspects on page 5 of the agenda. So I'll pass it over to Jenny, who also is just going to cover off some corrections as well.
Kia ora, everyone. Okay, so I'm going to take you through a high-level overview in this presentation on the annual plan papers in front of you today. We did publish a memo on Friday afternoon with some new information from Greater Wellington Regional Council on the bulk water levy, so just mention that. And there is a piece of paper on your table with some minor corrections as well. Okay. So in terms of the high-level timeline, I'll just quickly provide an overview of that. So back in August, we had a very important council meeting to work through and agree the high-level direction and approach for this annual plan, and there were decisions around some of the key underlying assumptions for the annual plan. Since then, through September and October, officers have been working through the detailed budget review process, and we had a council briefing on the 27th of November where we provided an update of where we'd got to. Today's meeting, we're seeking a range of decisions on budget matters, fees, etc., and most importantly on further direction and guidance as we head into the next stages of the annual plan. In February, we'll come back with some further final opportunity to make decisions for the annual plan and agree the engagement approach with the community. And then on the 25th of March, we'll present the final draft annual plan for adoption and the engagement material to sign that out, and then we'll progress through the community engagement process through the month of April. We've then got some time set aside from the 14th to the 16th of May to work through the feedback from the community and work through any analysis of that and progress decisions to finalise the annual plan. And then we've got meetings in June basically to finalise the plan on the 4th of June and then to adopt the annual plan and set the rates for the new year on the 27th of June. Okay, so in terms of the high-level approach, so it is year 2 of the long-term plan, and so we're expecting that there should be limited changes. We put a huge amount of effort into the LTP process, working through all the trade-offs and choices and priorities and so on. So overall, the strategic priorities, we're expecting that they remain in place, and similarly with the levels of service, that they remain unchanged. So intention should be for a light community engagement process. At the August meeting, you said to us that if there are any financial challenges or new things that have popped up since the LTP was adopted, that we need to work to find solutions and offsetting mechanisms, and we've been doing that through September and October. So things that we've seen change since the LTP was adopted, for example, the National Land Transport Program, we've got $22 million over 3 years less funding than what was in the LTP. We've had the Standard & Poor's credit rating downgrade, and we've had Days Bay wastewater repair work that was unexpected that we've had to deal with. Those are some examples that have popped up. Okay, so I'm going to pass over to Richard now just to briefly talk about the engagement.
Thank you, Jenny. Kia ora koutou, Mr. Mayor and councillors. So as Jenny mentioned, we're looking to do a light touch engagement this year, similar to what we went out with in 2022-23. Reason for this is under the Local Government Act, If there are no substantial changes reported on from the long-term plan, we do have the ability to reduce the level of engagement that we do. This enables us to do some focused work around things like water this year and some of the changes in transport that we'll take out and run as separate engagements. The light touch engagement will reduce the cost of the communication around the engagement, but we will still look to do engagement with the community in different ways. So using our hubs and libraries to get information out there, using our online platform and things, and giving material about the progress we've made against various projects and where that is going to be going in the year ahead. And as I noted, the water reform will run in parallel, likely going out late March, early April, and that's where we'll be able to actually do proper consultation on that big decision.
Thanks, Richard. Okay, so the next slide deals with the budget review process that we've been working through in September and October. I won't go through that. I'll just mention that our corporate leadership team, CLTs, met a number of times to work through various aspects of this annual plan and work through those solutions for some of the financial challenges that have popped up. Okay, next slide provides a summary of all the decisions that are in front of you today at this meeting. So we've got advice from Wellington Water and a separate paper on that, and I see Pete Wells at the back there ready to talk to that item. We've also got some proposed extra funding for the Local Water Done Well program, some funding to support that program to move to a new water CCO. There's a separate paper on the National Land Transport Program, reduction in revenue, and some proposed options to resolve that. Silverstream Landfill, proposed increase in CapEx. Tapua Hurunuku, a cost escalation. Asset revaluation impacts, so largely off the back of Three Waters assets revaluation changes and flow-on depreciation as a result of that. The Greater Wellington Regional Council bulk water cost thing with that memo that I mentioned earlier. Then there's a whole range of budget rephasing requests, and they're all listed there on the slide. And then finally, there's a proposed fees and charges changes across a number of areas. Okay, so I'll just jump into and give you a summary of the water services changes, because this is relatively new compared to what you saw at the last briefing. So in the OPEX side for water services, there's 3 key changes proposed. So Wellington Water Advice has requested some extra funding. After adjusting for the inflation that we had budgeted for, it's basically an extra $720,000. Our office advice is not to increase the budget, but rather to request that the funding is reprioritised within the existing base budget. And we know that Wellington Water is doing a lot of work around value for money and trying to find better procurement results. And so that's really at the back of that advice. The second item is around the Local Water Done Well, the extra funding to support the setup of the new CCO. So there's a funding request for extra $3 million. And we're proposing that that would be debt funded. And then the third item is the Greater Wellington Regional Council request for extra funding related to bulk water costs. So they've basically told us that whilst the LTP had proposed a 12% increase in the levy, the new numbers now are looking at 17% increase in the levy. So for us, what that means is after we adjust for water meter revenue changes, we'd basically be requiring an extra $800,000 of funding, and the rating impact would be a 0.45% rates increase. And that number, as I said, it's arrived very late, and we haven't factored that into the advice as yet, seeking direction from Council. Also, just want to mention there are 2 other items where there's potentially other budget changes. Te Mata Arawai and the Commerce Commission are currently consulting and seeking submissions on a proposed new levy. For us, it's going to be a cost of approximately $585,000. And so we haven't got any budget adjustment included for that one either, and we're waiting to see where that lands after the submission process. Okay, so moving across the capital information for water services. So there's a range of changes here. Overall, the big picture is 10 years. It's over 10 years. It's an extra $23 million. There is some bringing forward of the capital program. So for 2027, it's an increase of $30 million, and then some rephasing with the other years. So the rates adjustment proposed to deal with this one is basically a 0.3% increase, and the office advice is basically to adjust the capital program in line with the advice from Wellington Water on this. Okay, so the big picture in terms of the rates increases. So this slide summarizes where we've got to. So the blue bars show you what was in the LTP. And so for the first year of the plan, 25-26, we're basically proposing that we'd keep that rates increase the same at the 13.4% rates increase. And then for the years after that, there's an additional 0.3% to deal with the water services changes. And then in the last 4 years, there's a 0.5% rates increase, and that's to deal with a range of cost pressures, in particular the inflationary changes and higher interest rates that we're seeing in those later years of the plan. Diving into a bit more detail around 25-26 rates increase. So this slide shows you that basically through the LTP we had a 13.4% rates increase. And then in the papers today, you've got a proposed solution for the National Land Transport Program, and that one increases the rates by 0.7%. And then there's been some changes to revenue, so reduction in revenue, for example, in the building consents area where they have got lower activity and volumes expected. So that reduces revenue and has a negative, unfavourable impact for rates. So that pushes up the rates increase to 15%. And then there's been a bunch of actions taken to try and offset that. And so we've got OPEX reduction of $1.1 million, 1.1%. We've added in a new corporate leadership team savings target of $500,000. So that's reduced the rates by 0.3%. And then with the changes to the capital program, where we're pushing out some of our capital program, that reduces the rates increase further, and we're back down to that 13.4%. Okay, in terms of savings, in the current financial year, we've added in through the LTP, we added in a $600,000 savings target. And the CLT's been making some good progress in achieving that. We're about halfway through that. And it's been mainly through procurement activity that we've managed to make those savings, basically reviewing suppliers, the prices that we've been charged, and moving to new suppliers in some instances. So we've added an extra $500,000 savings target going forward now from 25-26 onwards, and for all the future years of the plan as well. So key message here is really if further savings are required to reduce the rates increase, we are really seeking direction from council around which areas of services you'd like to see reductions in activity or service levels. We obviously went through that long process through the LTP to work through trade-offs and choices, and any further savings now we really need direction from council. Okay, so lifting up and the big picture in terms of our financial projections. So the capital investment program, you can see there it's a $2.8 billion investment program over the 10 years. And off the back of all the decisions proposed today, it would be increasing by $57 million compared to what was in the LTP. And heavily dominated with Three Waters. The orange there is all the Three Waters investment. The debt projections are slightly higher than what we had in the LTP. So debt's peaking at $1.1 billion, and that's in 2030, and the net debt to revenue ratio at that point is 228%. And the graph on the right-hand side shows you the amount of debt headroom capacity we've got, and you can see that it's slightly lower than what we had in the LTP. So from 2027 to 2031, it's a little bit tighter, and down to only $89 million in 2027. In terms of the balanced budget, so off the back of the changes to depreciation from the asset revaluation process, the balanced budget is basically moving out by 5 years. And the advice in the paper is basically saying that we propose reviewing the level of depreciation funding through the next LTP. Okay, so the next two slides show you a summary of the rating impact for the different property categories. So the first one there, the average residential ratepayer, so property with a capital value of $815,000. The indicative rating increase would be $521 per annum or $10 per week. And 54% of that increase would be related to investment in Three Waters infrastructure. And the average commercial central at a value of $2.4 million would have an increase of $57 per week. Average commercial suburban, $43 per week. And the next slide breaks down that average residential ratepayer information a little bit further for you. Okay, so just to finish off now, there's some information in the paper around the water reform projections. So this modelling has been done off the back of the LTP numbers, and we will be presenting some further advice in February around the water services delivery plan and the latest projections and so on. These projections obviously assume they've got a number of assumptions like the go live date and the amount of debt repayment and when it'll happen and so on. But overall, the big picture, once you carve out from the balance sheet all the Three Waters assets and the revenue and debt and so on, basically it's a good positive story from us. Our debt drops down and our net debt to revenue improves quite dramatically. So I will finish off there and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. Any questions for Jenny or Richard as well? Councillor?
That was of the view that the $40 million depreciation into the 10-year plan is not a material change which would require an LTP amendment. I'm hoping not, because it'd be good if we can go through that efficient process again, but just wanted to be sure, and whether we've taken any advice on that from the auditors.
It's our view that it's not LTP amendment as such and requiring consultation.
Okay. Anything further from members? Just Jenny, just to again remind us the how much of the rates increase has been driven by water infrastructure investment?
So for 25-26, it's basically in that slide at the end, towards the end. So 54% of the rates increase for is basically Three Waters related. Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? Councillor Dyer?
Sorry, are we on high-level questions, or are we going to go through the tables?
We'll go through things later on. So it's just more on what Jenny has covered at a higher level. Yep. Councillor Mitchell?
Yeah, just coming back to the issue of depreciation, is it not considered, it needs to be consulted because it wasn't a decision of council to increase the depreciation? It was an asset revaluation. It was out of our hands, essentially. Is that why we wouldn't consult it?
Yeah, it is out of our hands. It's basically accounting standards that drives the need to adjust the depreciation. Yeah, and we're not proposing any big changes to the rating charges to offset that, because we know that we've been through the big decisions through the LTP around the level of renewals funding and the affordability challenges with the funding of renewals and so on. So basically, we don't have a choice around the depreciation. We've got to increase it. We can't consult with the community around that. It's an accounting standard requirement. Yeah, so that's sort of the key reasons.
Councillor Dyer?
Yeah, on the balanced budget stuff as well, which is obviously largely driven by that depreciation. I'm concerned about that we're not meeting our legislative benchmark anymore, whereas previously we were. Obviously, our own budget, we know, has been quite a high bar, and I've been fairly uncomfortable with that, but the legislative one is a bit more of a concern. Just wonder if you could talk to that and whether there's any risks.
So there is some detailed content in the papers. I'll just find the page. Yes, so page 22. No, sorry, there's some more detailed content. So page 29 onwards, there's a whole lot of content around the changes related to this depreciation impact And it also talks to the prudential benchmark that you're mentioning about us not achieving that. So, it isn't ideal, and it's challenging. It would have been better if we'd had this information when we did the LTP, but it is what it is. So, basically our advice is that through the next LTP that we'd look to reset. We've obviously also got the reform program happening at the same time where, once the reform program happens, we won't have this problem anymore because the Three Waters assets will move out of our balance sheet. So it's quite a unique situation. And so we're trying to find a pragmatic way forward with this proposed approach for the annual plan.
But just on the question, is there any sort of financial risk or penalties for not hitting the benchmark that's in legislation?
No, there's no financial risks. I suppose in terms of the Standard & Poor's credit rating, we know that we've got risks related to that. We've highlighted that on an ongoing basis. And that's really about our debt projections and the revenue settings associated with that. So no, there aren't any specific impacts in relation to that prudential benchmark piece as such. Yeah.
Deputy Mayor Lewis.
Thank you. I just, all these extra costs that are coming in outside of our control, are we alone in this, or are other councils that all the same going to be affected?
I would say we are generally all in the same boat. So, for example, the National Land Transport Program and the impacts of that's being, different councils are impacted in different ways. But generally, we're all facing similar impacts across the whole economy in New Zealand. Wellington's got some specifics that really challenge us. But yeah, I think we're all in the same boat trying to struggle through this. Yeah.
Councillor Edwards and Councillor Brown.
I'm wondering, is Standard & Poor's allowed to take into account what we know is going to be happening with water reform and this depreciation issue, and knowing that it's coming up, or are they not allowed to sort of take that into account until it actually happens?
They're very careful in their assessments as to what they're taking into account or not. So they particularly look at the legislation and where that's landed, and then decide their position. So up until now, they've basically been saying, because of the uncertainty of the legislation reform program, they haven't been taking it into account. But yeah, that could well change by the time we get to August next year and they do their next assessment.
Jenny, the request one of the requests that came through late, we had the briefing with Chief Executive and the Chair. Although we're not supporting that, so what is that going to mean to them if we're not? Wellington Water, sorry.
I think we probably should deal with that when we get to the Wellington Water paper.
Okay. No other question. Councillor Dyer.
Yeah, just one final one on the depreciation. It mentioned there that us, Upper Hutt and Wellington all did the revaluation together. Are they going to be taking those same figures to inform their annual plans for next year, or are they doing a different cycle, or is this a snapshot for the whole region? We'll all be using new figures.
So everybody will have new figures and will have to use the latest depreciation numbers off the asset revaluations. Each council will be impacted differently. So Wellington City Council, for example, their asset revaluation jumped up 2 years ago, and so they've been adjusting, working through that process for a while, having those much higher levels of asset values and depreciation. So their last revaluation, they weren't impacted as much as us, and Upper Hutt also isn't impacted as much as us. So we've had this big jump, which is unusual, but it is what it is, and we're having to deal with it now.
Cool. And I was going to ask if there's a way we could spread it sort of over the 3 years, but are we kind of effectively doing that because we're not fully funding it anyway?
Basically, that's the approach. We'll pick up the funding of that in the longer term. Yeah.
Okay, if that covers all the sort of higher level questions, we'll now move through the papers and the tables. So what we'll do is we often have for LTP annual plan meetings, is we'll go through the reports and then we'll come back to item 5 and work through the tables that are there as well. So, and we'll cover each issue as we get to it. So in accordance with standing orders, precedence of business, 10.4, I call precedence to items 5B, 5C, and 5D. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Briggs. All those in favour say aye. Those against no. Declare that carried. Moving through to 5B, which is investment in water services. And we have Pete Wells and obviously Bruce Hodgins here. I'll pass it over to you.
Kia ora tātou. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Peter's here to answer any specific questions that you might have that I'm not able to cover. As Jenny has really done a good job in overviewing this paper with the things that are standing out, there's only a couple of extra things that I would mention before you're welcome to ask any questions. So the first one is just to point out that within the program, the Jackson Street upgrades are embedded now in the program, so they're all happening. And so the capital program has been moved around to accommodate that. There have been some items that have been pushed out and some brought forward, and that is something when we had the briefing that we talked about, that as Wellington Water gets into the detail of planning these projects, then that is the natural course of things that we get a change in the program. The other thing that I would point out is that under paragraph 38 of the Wellington Water Advice, there are other works, I haven't recommended, there are other works that are in the wings that Wellington Water could bring forward, particularly renewals, water and wastewater, that could be brought forward fairly quickly into the program if you had an appetite to spend some more. The only other thing to mention, and this is something that's quite recent from last week, is with the Western Hills wastewater main, you've now brought forward the $5.2 million to undertake those urgent works that will occur under the motorway and beside the motorway. But the section that is immediately south of that, the downstream section that's within Riverlink, has come up for discussion between Greater Wellington and ourselves. And at the moment, there currently isn't any money in the budget to deal with a section, and that work is looking to be programmed to start in 25-26. So at this stage, the next section, our very rough estimate is around $6.6 million, which we would need to find some money to bring into that budget. We'll be bringing back more information on that at the February meeting. Of course, Upper Hutt City would be sharing that cost with us, so it would end up being around $4.6 million for Hutt City. So they were the main points that I just wanted to raise in addition to the ones that Jenny has raised. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Bruce. With that Western Hills sewer main, the piece that you mentioned at the end there, are we far enough out now that, you know, if we were to look to reprioritise within budgets, that it wouldn't have a major impact? I mean, no, you can't. It means you'll do less of what was in the program, but is there enough time for Wellington Water to factor that in?
I believe there is. I think with the information that we'll have by February, if you give us direction as to how you want that to happen, whether you want us to push other works out to accommodate this, then we can certainly ask Wellington Water to provide us with some options in regards to that.
Okay, we can deal with that in February. Any questions on the paper? I wonder if you want to cover off, Bruce, Councillor Brown's question around the ask from Wellington Water and the advice which has been given around what to fund and potentially what not to fund.
Certainly. In terms of the OPEX, so Wellington Water has asked for a further $720,000 than what we've got on the budget. At the LTP time, we took on everything for year one, and then year 2, 3, we didn't take on everything, but we did add money back in after we had further advice. My view on this is that we go back to Wellington Water and ask for further information in respect of how Wellington Water can manage within the envelope we have and what are the risks around doing that, so that we can make an informed choice in February if you want to bring in further OPEX money. I'd point out that this financial year, with the additional $900,000 spend that we had in operating costs for the fault around at Today's Bay, we're still going to come in pretty close on budget at this stage for forecast. So that's something that says to me that Wellington Water should have enough ability to move within the budget that we've set.
Okay. Does that cover your question, Councillor Brown? Yep. Any other questions? Councillor Stallinger.
Yes, I remain really concerned about the costs we're paying for asset replacements, and I've mentioned them at a couple of other committees and have really been looking for some more answers. I understand it might take a while to get those, but I just really want to take the chance to emphasise the questions I have here now, because I really need to have these answered before I'd be looking to sign off on a draft annual plan. It stems really from the large increase in our asset valuations, which, just looking at water assets, my last quick calc was about 3 times what they used to be, up 1.3 billion. And predominantly due to us paying higher prices for each asset replacement. So I had a bit of a look at other councils' annual reports, and like our CFO said, around the Wellington region, there's been some high increases, similar to ours, but not as large. But around the rest of the country, I couldn't see these similar cost increases being reflected in their financial statements. Then more recently, we heard Wellington Water comment that they perhaps hadn't had the same focus on asset costs as they had recently, just because of the huge pressure they've been under, understandably, because of the workloads that have been requested upon them for ourselves, I suppose, in particular, because we've looked to up our investment in our water assets. And then further, got a bit more concern arose when I heard the auditors comment and them emphasising that they were not confident in our own asset values, partly because of the large increase, and those values and costs may not be sustainable into the future. So it's all really just led to me growing more and more concerned about the questions I've raised at other committees. Is now the time to be spending so much when we don't really have confidence, well, I don't at least, that we're getting value for money at the moment. You know, if you look at, it's just the scale of it as well, because when I look back at the 600 million we had in our LTP 3 years ago, and we added an extra whole billion, well, if our costs to replace assets have gone up by that percentage, as these valuations have indicated, we're actually getting nothing more for spending that extra $1 billion, because it's been gobbled up by our higher prices. So my questions are, why have our unit costs increased by far more than other councils, especially those beyond Wellington? Will the Wellington Water procurement process review, which I'm very pleased is happening, and grateful for the team for pursuing that, but will it independently assess the cost oversight from all the layers of governance, from the executives through to us here at this table, and how we really haven't talked about this issue before now? We must have known the costs were going up to this degree. So I'm just really hoping that the review will find any opportunities for us to improve and do better and be on more top of this issue in the future. And then my final question, which I've raised before, is should we defer non-urgent capex until we can confirm we're getting value for money and know we have effective controls over expenditure in this area? So, not expecting an answer right now, but I thought it's question time, if I can just put those on the table and hopefully get some comment at some stage as we progress through this process.
Bruce, did you want to comment on that at this point in time?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I can't comment in detail in terms of the scope of the review that is being undertaken by Pat and the Wellington Water team, but certainly they have recognised that in changing a system that they had, you know, with the tendering every piece of work to having the panels has changed things. And they did that in order to be able to increase the amount of work that needs to be done. But I think it's a bit more complicated than just that. I think that within the Wellington region, because of the amount of work that needs to be done and the gearing up that Wellington Water has done over the last few years, that it comes down to supply and demand to some degree, and that the number of contractors that are able to do that work means that it's not so competitive, and the prices accordingly. The other thing that I think is happened is that those companies have built in a higher degree of risk because we have not been able to necessarily show that we are going to sustain that level of spending over time. And you know, this has happened most recently in terms of the bread and butter work, the renewal of water pipes, for instance, where and other pipes where the amount of kilometres has dried up considerably. You know, it's halved or less than halved from previous years. So, you know, we'll be picking up some of that risk, I think, in terms of those contractors having to, factor that in when they tendered. In terms of the works that we've got on our books at the moment, I'm not sure that we can say that there's anything there that we should be deferring. You know, clearly there's a large sum of money that we're spending over the next few years on the wastewater treatment plant, and we've got no choice of that. We've just got to box on. And if we start delaying what renewals we're doing in terms of our pipes, we're just exacerbating a problem and putting it onto future generations. We have to keep up. I mean, the other day, Pat was saying something along the lines that at the rate the region was renewing pipes, it was going to be 660 years or something to renew them all. And you know, he also mentioned that even with building up the amount of work that we need to do over the next few years at 30%, it's going to be something like 15 years before we get to the position that we're in now. So we're never going to be better than now for 15 years. So, you know, it's getting worse and worse. So no, I don't believe that we should be deferring works at this time. And I think that some of those, and we'll find some further information and feed it back to you, but just trying to find what the relative costs are for those renewal of let's say water pipes in the suburbs, and finding how they compare to other areas, just to see what the difference is. I don't have them here, but we'll do that.
So certainly, Pete, did you want to say anything on that? No? Sorry, I thought you looked at me. No, just to say, I think they're all very fair questions, and even the team from Wellington Water have been able to respond to them. I think also with that additional context of the last thing, I'm sure Councillor Stallinger would agree, we wouldn't want to have the unintended consequence of turning the tap off some of that capital program and exacerbating our current problems, as you've just articulated, Bruce. So I think that advice alongside some of those questions, and just making sure we get that balance of looking at all the different issues there is fair. And one thing I would say is there is a report coming to the Wellington Water Committee in March, which is looking at the value for money, quite big piece of work, which may also answer some of the questions you're asking, Councillor Stallinger, because it's hard to understand the scale of that issue that the new chief executive has identified at the moment, but there might be some answers there coming. Yep.
Just very quickly, I missed the date that you said that report was coming through.
So it's coming, I believe, March, whenever the next Wellington Water Committee meeting is. It's in, I think, March the 14th, possibly, around then. Okay, Councillor Parkin.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm wondering whether or not this raises the question of should we actually be bringing things in-house. We've had that situation or idea raised a number of times. But if we're going to consistently be approached by our contractors and they are not giving us value for money, then maybe that means that we need to take that risk internally and start providing for ourselves. Is that going to be included in that report?
No, that would be an issue for the new entity, I would say. But that's a big question and would be a significant shift. I'm not saying it's a fair question, but that would be one for a new entity. It's not something Wellington Water would be able to do now. Okay, any other questions? Councillor Mitchell?
Yeah, just in regards to this last minute request we've had from Greater Wellington with regards to IT, is that the same in your own paper, Bruce, that in recommendation 8 talked about this share of city councils? Is that same? Are we talking about the same thing there?
Yes, we are. So recommendations 8 and 9, and I think it was paragraph 17 of the report all refers to that same issue. So what we'd indicated was we hadn't included anything, but we needed to be on the basis that we knew there was discussions going on. So Greater Wellington looks as though it's going to pick up those costs and then pass them through the bulk water levy.
Yeah, and the reason I questioned it, because my understanding from the briefing we had recently that each of our councils would be asked to contribute, and it feels like the Greater Wellington decision is cutting across the decision for our councils to contribute. So just kind of questioned how that sat in the decision-making framework of the Wellington Water Committee, perhaps. The other thing too is that, of course, they're not going to borrow the money and recoup it from their own ratepayers. They're going to pass it on as a fee for us, which is another additional rate increase for our ratepayers, even though they're the same ratepayers. It just kind of feels like they've just cut straight across that whole conversation and adding to our rates increase.
I guess from my perspective, it created certainty about how that was going to be funded, because if each decision was to be made, if decisions were to be made by each council, then there may be a mix of decisions that weren't equitable, let's say. I don't think it would have cost us any more than what we're being charged. I think if we did it in-house, we'd probably end up with a similar number. Yeah.
Vital piece of work, potential same income with an inferior outcome if you put it to each individual council. I think the risk. Yeah. Councillor Brown?
Yeah, that's the confusion for me too, was that the main point of the briefing when Nick and the CE came in was around the IT system. So is this just a different way of getting the money from us? Yeah.
I'll jump in for a question while you fix your mic. Cool. Recommendation 11 says that noting that central government's proposing to put in a levy for $500,000 for Te Mata Arawai and the Commerce Commission. Was that always the case, or is this something new that's just sprung up as a new way for the government to get some money out of us?
We received advice on this just recently, within the last month or so. So I think it's in line with general government policy of recouping these sorts of costs. So it's not really a surprise. And I don't think you want to hold your breath in terms of whether we'll get that changed.
Thanks. And just while we were talking, I did recall that actually, Councillor Parkin, to your question around in-house services, there are some things Wellington Water are looking at now around the use of consultants and actually bringing those jobs in-house. While I think you maybe were pointing more to the sort of on-the-ground delivery, but there is a little bit of work being done, I suppose, on that. For anyone who wants to read through the Wellington Water papers, there's some good information on that as well around the restructure or proposal they're doing there. Okay, no other questions? Okay, we've got the recommendations in front of us. So these are recommendations 1 through to 11, and my recommendation is to endorse them. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Briggs, any discussion? All those in favour? Oh, Councillor Brown.
This boils down to the last 6 years, we have just openly given money because we have to, because our pipes are in the position that they're in. Along the way, there's been multiple events that have happened at Wellington Water, and the latest one, when we had Nick and co come and speak at the table, saying if the latest event hadn't happened, they would have just carried on as they were anyway without the IT system. So it boils down to trust, and I mentioned at that briefing that our council needs IT systems really bad too, and it hits at the trust that the public have with us, and yet here we are, they've found a clever and cute way to get the money from us anyway, through the IT systems, through the Greater Wellington, and then just passing it on to us because it was clear that we didn't support it. So it's about trust, and it's really going on Wellington Water and these the extra money that's come in late and asking for all sorts of things that our council equally need, and then they've found another way to do it. I just want to note that's pretty cheeky.
I just want to put some balance in there. The council hadn't come to a view on their support or not for the IT system. There were other aspects of the operational funding that they asked for, which I think advice came back that said no. But on the IT piece, I mean, this is asset management 101, absolutely vital for them to actually be able to function, which should have been done. So, I mean, I just be careful. I think that it's different to some of the other asks that they had made, which we would look to push back on. Councillor Stellinger?
Yeah, I would just provide a bit of counterbalance to that as well. If the company's going to be spending $1.6 billion on our behalf and don't have a good IT system to support that, it's a fraction of a % of savings they would need to achieve in order to offset the IT costs. So I think it's essential spend. Probably could say a blunder that it wasn't done right on day one when the company was set up way back many years ago in its earlier forms. And just in general, making a comment on the recommendations, if now's the time. I'm happy to support these, but when we come back in next time round for another revisit with the further information, of course, views may change, including my own, depending on how it all stacks up. Particularly the answers to those questions I raised earlier, and I thank our officer for some good responses already, which started to ease my mind as to the rationale. But I think we really need a more fulsome report, so hopefully that will come. Yep, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comment? All those in favour say aye. Those against no. Declare that carried. Thank you. Moving through to item 5C. John. This is on the National Land Transport Program. Page 246.
Kia ora, Mayor and Councillors. So this is a paper and a briefing on the 2024 to 27 NLTP funding from NZTA. So basically, there's a lot of detail in the paper. So what we've done is put together a presentation to take you through the key parts, so you can also see where the impact, if you like, of the funding shortfall has come from, and it's split down to different activities and what that means in reality, and then we'll also asking you to, or providing some options for you to make a decision on as to whether you would like to, how we might bridge the gap in the funding. So as you see at the front, we informed in June the indicative maintenance operations and renewals funding, through the NLTP. It wasn't ratified until quite a bit later, but that was the initial heads up that we got, and then some suitable options. We presented to INR a couple of weeks ago on what that looks like in reality. So this then slide here breaks down what we asked for and what we got. So, and comparing it to 2021 to 24. So, whilst in operations, for example, we've gone up by quite a bit, the costs have also gone up. So that's there's 4.6% that's unfunded. So that's not that massive a gap. But if we look at potholes, there's quite a percentage there that's unfunded. So in our LTP and what we asked for was 49 million, and we got 29.2. So there's one big chunk of the shortfall. So cycleways, shared paths, and footpaths were all rolled in. So as you're aware, there's no walking and cycling funding for the sort of micromobility program, which we'll show you in the next couple of slides. But that is around maintenance and renewals of cycleways, shared paths, and footpaths. So not only we've got Pitaoni to Melling now, which is now ours to maintain for the most part. We've got the Beltway. We have one bay finished for Te Pura-Horonuku and two more over the next month or so. So there is more and more coming online, and less funding for that. So that's, and then the footpath funding is included in that as well. So I won't go through this line by line, and you should have it in diligence. So this is basically the breakdown. At INR, we were requested to go down another level of detail, just so you can kind of see what we asked for and what the funding was. So to take you through, so funded, obviously, in terms of status on the right-hand column means funded and confirmed. Probable is likely to be funded, but needs a little bit more information, and Eastern Hutt Road resilience is one of those. So that was listed as probable, but we had to go back through a process to provide an addendum to our business case to align with the new government policy statement. And Riverlink walking and cycling paths, we've got that in there. Local road improvements, which so Woburn intersection, just down to the side, Queens and High. Those ones we just need to update some information and go through a process to get those. So, but as you can see, cross valley connections, micromobility, LEDs, for example, and the local road, the parking fund that we sought because of housing intensification, all got zero. So there are 3 options and 2 sub-options that we've gone away and done some work on, and thank you to members of INR who suggested a couple of additional options in here. So option 1, which is basically no change to LTP budgets, retaining the local share that doesn't get a subsidy, and adjusting revenue to align with NZTA funding. And then the financial impact of those is on the right. Option 2 is officer's recommendation. But this includes LTP budgets reducing slightly, retaining that. So the things we applied for a subsidy for, if you like, that we keep those and use them towards this to reduce the level of service impacts. So some budgets reduced to prop up sort of road surfacing and potholes, for example, some of that small pot of walking and cycling. Option 3 has got the biggest impact in terms of indicative debt and rates, and we wouldn't, I'll show you visually in a minute what that looks like. That would not be officer's recommendation. There's 2 sub-options. 2A, so if you decide to go with option 2, which has got the 0.7% rates impact, but we'll be keeping the where pretty much possible the existing level of service. One is 2A is increasing the footpath renewals. So we've got a small pot of money for footpaths renewals every year. I don't think I need to talk too much about the level of the quality of some of the footpaths. And then option 2B was around retaining some CapEx for unforeseen traffic safety improvements. So, or things like coroner's recommendations. So we know we are going to get a coroner's report. Well, we presume we'll get a coroner's report on Eastern Hutt Road on the unfortunate hit and run from approximately 18 months ago. So for things like that, or traffic or safety issues that crop up from time to time, like on the corner of Langs and Myrtle, which is an emerging issue around some of the safety there. Visually, what does option 1 look like? Pretty good on the left-hand side. So renewals will continue to be undertaken as a footpath example and a road example. We would only just do the localised repairs and keep the network safe. So that wouldn't be doing the whole of the area. So there might be a failure of kind of a metre, but the next bit around it looks like it could go any time. So that's the sort of thing we wouldn't be doing. We would just be doing the immediate area. Option 2, renewals that wouldn't be undertaken. There's not quite as good as option 1 in terms of that first image, but we would still continue to make safe and would actually get a little bit more done around option 2. Option 3 is not great. So the network would deteriorate. It would create longer term funding issues because we would need to invest more down the track. So that's obviously not a recommendation that we'd be reinforcing. So option 2A, that was the new little bit of funding around footpath repairs. So there's singers and kotokotos up there. It looks awful. So this is the kind of thing that we would be progressing in this year. If not, we'd be closing that particular access way because, as you can see, the condition is not flash. And then other options next year, or the next 2 years. So if that a little bit of additional funding and reallocation, these would be the roads that we would be prioritising, which are the worst footpaths according to the data around condition that we have. And then finally, the safety risks 2B, if that was something that you would like us to proceed. Improvements recommended by coroners, post-incident safety improvements, and other foreseen essential safety improvements. So it's around having that bucket of money should something happen that is not great, but just identifying that both for the footpath and for the safety ones, there is no NZTA subsidy for those. So that's why hence we're coming back and asking for the funding if you wish to proceed for that. Open to any questions.
Thank you, John. Councillor Parkin.
Thank you, John. How much would we be looking at if we tried to keep the same level of service that did both 2A and B?
Sorry. I think it was 6.3. Yes, that's correct.
Sorry, another councillor had their hand. Councillor Shaw.
Thanks for your report, John. My question's about local road parking density, where we asked for 12 million and got none. So if there are further housing intensifications still to be addressed in terms of car parking, you're saying that that's going to have to come from our budget, that there's no support from central government in any way?
Through you, Chair. So we don't have any funding for that in our budget either. So the council approved the funding for that on the basis that we got NLTP funding, and if not, there would be none. So part of that has come into these numbers to reduce the impacts on the rates to enable us to deliver the rest of the program.
And so, I mean, what's happened with the indented parking has made a really big difference to where they have been installed. I assume there's other developments out there where our residents are going to get really angry about the same thing. Is any of this added to a developer's contribution in any way?
So there's been quite a bit of work done on that. But I think the best way forward with this, and we are doing this is both our planning and transport teams are actually working together right from the start, ahead of these developments starting, so that all these impacts can be brought on. It's the development contributions, but that's quite a challenging. It's a challenge, and it's quite difficult. You know, there's a couple of streets where it just wouldn't happen, particularly retrospectively. It's just there's no chance. So working together up front and with the developer on what those options are is the best way forward, and that's what we're doing at the moment.
And can I just add to that, Mr. Mayor? In terms of the development contributions charges, we don't have any capital investment program included in the DC charges in relation to what you're talking about. So it's not included in those DC charges.
Any other questions? Councillor Brown.
Is that low cost, low risk project saying that only one of the 38 got accepted? So does that mean the other 37, will we get another opportunity to look at them or find other tools to support them?
Through you, Chair. Yes, we will, Councillor. So some of those are quite potentially safety issues that could come into that option 2B as well. But at the moment, because in the past we've had a shopping trolley, if you like, and we've got funding and we could prioritise raised pedestrian platforms or roundabouts or what have you, depending on where it was and what we're trying to correct. So, yeah. So at the moment we only have the Wainui Mata Hill safety barrier in the middle. So that's all we can spend that money on. We're just waiting to see what happens in year 2 and 3 of the NLTP, because at times sometimes there's more funding becomes available if some councils don't fund that. So, but we'll continually relook at the priorities on that list as well.
Councillor Parker.
Kia ora. I think this one's for Jenny. Regarding the DC charging, DC charges, should we actually be looking at putting that in terms of parking and developing something so that we are actually putting those charges on developers directly, or is this too complicated?
We could make an amendment to the development contributions policy to add additional capital investment program, for example, what you're talking about. So we could do that. We just need to be really certain that we are going to do the work. And so part of the reason why it wasn't included in the development contributions through this last LTP was there was some uncertainty around the NZTA funding piece, and we thought it was better to wait and see where that landed. So it is potentially a change that could be made in the future, but we just need to remember that DCs are only, picked up, and we pick up a small amount of funding over a long period of time. So we've got to actually debt fund it initially, and that, in our current context with limited debt headroom, that would add further pressure to our overall financial position.
Councillor Mitchell.
Would that, even if theoretically we could do that, would it be subject to legal challenge? It sounds like, the government's told us you can't require car parks in the developments anymore. To turn around and go, well, you need to pay for car parks outside the development, feels like something that would surely be challenged by developers. I don't know if anyone has an opinion on that, but
Maybe one we take offline. It's a fair question, and I think it would be one certainly when we review that policy again. We would look to explore it. But we can. Okay. Any other questions, Councillor Dyer?
Yeah, on the LED street lighting removal, obviously cutting the funding to renewals entirely back to zero will lead to sort of an increase in the responsiveness as they fail and we have to replace them. Christchurch, and obviously there's a cost saving as well. Christchurch switched to LED for the entire city and saved 1.5 million a year just on electricity. So my question is, has that budget line sort of been looked at as the whole system of street lighting, from electricity costs to increasing renewals, if we were just to do it even without the subsidy?
Through you, Chair. Thanks, Councillor. So when this was done originally, that was the whole city and doing the whole rollout, and it did include electricity, everything else, as far as I can remember. But yeah, that was one of the things that came through last year that was approved by council on the basis of NZTA funding. So, should we go back and have a look at, we're replacing as they fail, not replacing verbatim. So, I don't have the exact, so the 12 million is basically the remaining cost to actually roll the rest of them out. Yeah.
Could that come back to us in Feb? Just like the whole, obviously the amount of we're spending and renewing them as they fail is just going to go up if we're not fixing them up front.
Through you, Chair, so officers can look into that. February might be a bit tight in terms of getting that information, but we'll get everything we can.
Okay. Deputy Mayor Lewis.
Thank you. Just looking at those 2As and Bs and the extra rating that would go on all the overall rating, I just wondered about the condition of those roads and the footpaths. Will they at any stage be shut or closed if they're not up to a standard?
Through you, Chair. So definitely the first image I think was Kora and Singers. That's the worst. So at this stage I don't think we would shut, but it depends on the extent of the damage and rainfall and various other things.
Okay, no other questions? Okay, we've got the options in front of us. Is there a councillor who would like to put forward an option? Councillor Edwards.
I'd like to move that we opt for option 6, both A and B, given that, well, I would argue this is absolute core council responsibility, bread and butter, and there's other things I'd cut from the budget before looking at not doing any footpath renewal and not making any provision for safety improvements. And I could name a couple of projects, but I won't at this stage.
Okay, so that's option 2, A and B. So A and B under 6. Seconded by Councillor Stallinger. Any discussion? Councillor Briggs.
Just support Councillor Edwards in his recommendations. The core infrastructure of our city and our footpaths are needed for accessibility. If people can't get down their street to get to the bus stop, to get to the shops, they're then housebound in many situations. And this is core responsibility. Unfortunately, a lot of our footpaths have been left for so long without being repaired and looked after in the state. Much like our pipes have been left as we've been doing bigger projects above the ground and not taking care of the day-to-day basics. So very, very happy to be supporting the motion today.
Councillor Stallinger.
Yes, obviously I support it given my seconding of the motion, but just want to thank the officers. I think this was a tough situation and they found a really good balance in their recommendations to us. So thanks.
Councillor Tupou.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And just, and I'm probably going to sound like Glenda here today, but as you know, Mr. Mayor, I do a little bit of voluntary work in the disability community, and I often get a lot of feedback from our clients in that space that there are a lot of unsafe surfaces across the city, as just echoing colleagues, and that's why I believe this is a priority and support this motion. Kia ora.
Thank you. I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour say aye. Those against no. Declare that carried. Moving through to item 5D, which is the rating policy decisions in regards to Jackson Street program. So we've got Alicia, welcome. Any comments you'd like to make, and then we'll move through to the recommendations.
Kia ora, thank you. This report has further information on 3 proposed changes to the rating policies. The changes include introducing a voluntary targeted rate for 3 waters infrastructure repairs on private properties, extending the Jackson Street program targeted rate area, and reducing the number of rates instalments from 6 to 4. The voluntary targeted rate would help ratepayers fund these repairs if they're unable to access traditional lending, and reducing the number of rates instalments could save approximately $50,000 a year in printing and postage costs. Now, we've heard from the chair of the Jackson Street program on Friday saying that due to the economic challenges and feedback from the recent early engagement we did with affected property owners and tenants, that they'd be comfortable with discussions on this being deferred to a later date. And we've got a suggested change to the resolutions included. We've also had some feedback from another council that recently changed from 4 to 2 rates instalments, and some of the benefits that they saw was an increase in the number of ratepayers choosing to pay by direct debit, weekly, fortnightly and monthly. And they also had some positive feedback from their community around the cost-saving measure. Effective communication was a really key part of their strategy. So the report presents several resolutions on each of those proposals, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Alicia. And apologies, I should have said the other two items as well. And what we'll do is we'll go through each of them separately through the recs, but we'll take questions first. Councillor Dyer.
Yeah, just on the reducing the number of instalments, did you say the example was going from 4 to 2?
Yeah.
And then my question was going to be, have we considered just ripping the Band-Aid off and going straight from 6 to 2? Obviously, the majority of people are 4. We're the only one doing 6, but there are a number doing 2 that you obviously got some feedback from. Was that considered?
No, we didn't consider that, but it seemed as though it was too big a change for going from 6 to 2, but it's something that we could explore.
And if we were to go from 6 to 2, I'm assuming it would just be 50 times 2 saving, so $100,000 saving rather than 50,000, or?
Yeah, it potentially would be as high as that.
Okay.
Other questions? Councillor Stallinger, then Councillor Edwards.
Just one on the voluntary targeted rate, and excuse me if I've missed this in previous discussions, but is the works compulsory? I remember a previous scheme where residents were obliged to do the works, and if they didn't, council's contractor would have put a contractor there and do it, and then it would be added to the rates. Is this just now a scheme where it's up to them whether they do the repairs or not?
I'm going to ask Bruce to answer that.
So we don't. We work with landowners to try and encourage them to do this work, and we see this as being another tool in the toolbox to encourage them to do the right thing. So you'll recall we've had. We have a team at Wellington Water that goes around and does these sanitary reviews in different parts of the city, looking at where there are leaks that are occurring. And so in most instances, people want to do the right thing, and they do the right thing. So it's very seldom that we get into a position where we're trying to force somebody to do it. But this just gives us another tool, I suppose, to encourage somebody who may not be able to find the funding elsewhere to do it, but it is a last resort.
Councillor Morgan. Oh, sorry, it was Councillor Edwards, then Councillor Morgan.
Sorry. Yeah, look, the rates instalment issue, I guess I am a little bit uncomfortable moving from 6 to 4 because even though obviously the annual amount stays the same, it's psychological impact of getting that bigger bill, even if it's only 4 times a year rather than 6. I'm all in favour of encouraging ratepayers to look at the options to pay, direct debit monthly, fortnightly. Anything we can do to increase that just seems so logical and help people with budgeting. But have we looked at the option, and I understand I'm very interested in saving $50,000, postage and paper costs. Have we looked at the option that the banks use, is that if you choose to have your bill posted to you through the mail, you pay for that privilege by way of a few dollars on your rate bill to cover that cost?
Excuse me. That's not something that we've looked at, but it is something that we can take into consideration. It would be potentially difficult to implement as part of the rating policy. It may be some other type of fee that we would need to incorporate, potentially. But,
Councillor Morgan, then Councillor Brown.
Kia ora. With the Jackson Street program, the survey was pretty conclusive at 96%, and we've just heard from you at opposed, but a possible deferral of that. Is there any cost involved with that then, if that were to happen?
To defer?
Yeah.
No.
Councillor Brown, then Councillor Tupou.
Yeah, I'm not sure about the 6 to 4 either. But I still get the paper version of rates, and would one of our biggest communications moves be to encourage people to move to email, almost in an opt-out version? You know, opt in if you want paper or you're getting email.
That could be something that we did. There are a lot of the community that still like to receive their communication by printed and posted, but that is something that we could look at doing potentially as well.
Councillor Tupou.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Just on the voluntary targeted rate scheme, excuse me. I think this is an excellent program. It's going to address really a poverty gap in the city when it comes to a lot of our whānau who can't afford upfront to go to the sharks, Mr. Mayor. And so my only ask is that I understand that we do need to charge interest to maintain the scheme, but that we keep that interest as low as possible and as affordable as possible. But it is, we can see the light at the end of the tunnel with the regulatory changes that allow us to achieve this. So just that was my question as well, through you, Chair, is that possible to keep the interest that we charge as low as possible?
The amount of the interest would be a decision that we would look to you to make, and the consider what we were thinking about was at the council's cost of borrowing as at the 30th of June, for example.
I'd imagine it'd be council cost, the borrowing, plus any sort of administrative cost would have to factor in, but it shouldn't be something we're looking to make money off. That's I think Councillor Tupou's point. So when that information comes back. Yep. Any Councillor Salinger?
Yes, just on the Jackson Street matter, I was surprised to see the response rate was very low, and I thought if I was there and someone sent me a survey like that, I would be sure to express a view, given it was potentially hitting me in the pocket, whether I thought it was a good idea or not. Any idea why most people didn't reply?
Through you, Chair. Low engagement rates, unfortunately, aren't unusual in terms of these types of engagements. They sometimes reflect people's capacity to participate in a particular engagement, not necessarily a lack of interest in the topic. Although we approach this in a bare bones way per council's direction, we did also visit businesses, so officers did engage in face-to-face conversations as well as direct emails, and could simply reflect people's capacity to engage in this period of time.
I think the main thing I would want to have confidence on is that obviously the letters were sent to the right people, that they did have that option at the very least, and we're confident that that process, while bare bones, did get to the right people. Yep.
Through you, Chair, yes. It was sent directly to businesses in the affected area, so we're pretty confident that that was direct with the businesses that would be affected, and those businesses that would potentially be part of the extended zone would have been advised and had the opportunity to participate.
So business owner rather than property owner?
Yep. Yeah, so it would be business owner, it would be the, sorry, property owner, because that's the rating details it would have.
Yep, yep, that's what I understood. Okay, any other questions? Okay, we'll go to the first recommendations, which is on the voluntary targeted rate, 1 through to 4, and this would be advancing this piece of work. I'm happy to support it and echo Councillor Tupou's good points. So I'll move that. Do I have a seconder? 1 through to 4, seconded by Councillor Brown. Any discussion? All those in favour say aye. Those against no. Declare that carried. Jackson Street program. So we have 5, 6, 7 here, and really this is to consider the feedback. We have heard that there was a request from the chair for this to be deferred. I think that this is a matter which has been bubbling away for a number of years now. I would rather just put it to bed and it's a no, to be quite honest. That doesn't stop a request from JSP in the future to a future council making the same request. Nothing stopping that. But I wouldn't want this to be sit on a officers' work list to have to come around to again. I think we've gone through the process, and while I would agree 10% isn't a great response rate, it was pretty overwhelming, the feedback to negate this, and it backs up what I've heard over the years on this particular issue as well. Councillor Parkin?
Kia ora. Similar to you, Chair, I would be more than happy to see this put to bed. The answer is quite clear with that data. However, I would like to reflect on the fact that we still asked a binary yes/no question, and I would again ask officers that can we please use a 5-point Likert scale whenever we are going out to get data like this from the community, because it will give us more information to work with. This one was quite clear, but in the future things could be quite a lot more nuanced, and having that data would make life easier.
See Jared taking notes. So, yep. Okay. Any Councillor Edwards, Councillor Briggs?
Just a question, if we pass what's written here, we're going to do some further consultation?
Sorry, no, so that would change, and that would just be saying no. So no further work would be done on this, and that the matter's put to bed. We'll get some recs, which should we throw up on the screen now, just so everyone's clear? Yep. Okay, so acknowledges feedback from ratepayers and that JSP no longer wants to proceed with the proposed targeted rate and agrees not to extend the JSP rate area. So that's just clear that we're not deferring the decision. They have asked that, but we are clear that we're just not doing it. Yep. Okay. Sorry, a couple more comments. Councillor Briggs, then we'll come over the other side.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think it's also helpful for JSP as well. Like, as you've noticed, this has been on for a long time, and in the past when it has been deferred, and more optimism and more hope is actually not helpful. And so this gives a clear direction to JSP as well. And actually, again, it's a small portion of the potential building owners that could have responded, but those that did have had their say. And if JSP wants to come in the future to another council and ask to request an extension, then they should engage their community and the building owners first and kind of see where
they did do that, and we did actually needed to do our, so just a correction on that. Yeah.
No, and we need to do ours, but if they're wanting to come with an option to extend in the future, and they should be doing the canvassing first to get that support before coming and asking us to consider it as well. And I think that's a little bit of where it's fallen over, is that there wasn't support en masse from those businesses, maybe from the operators, but not from the building owners. And what we've done, I think, is correct, going to the ratepayer, the building owner, and checking in if there's support or not. But it's, yeah, what I want to see happen is in 2 or 3 years' time, this conversation again, and the amount of time we've spent on it, reoccurring without the support and the request from that community.
Yeah, no, I think I get your point, but I just wouldn't want to leave the impression that to go and canvass a few businesses who then say they support, to then that be brought to us as a reason to relitigate this, because that has happened literally in the past. So I just wouldn't want to avoid the same thing happening.
I think we're on the same page of not wanting to go down this rabbit hole again, unless it really needs to happen and there's actually demonstrable support there from the wider community rather than just a handful.
I think that's right. Yeah. Councillor Morgan?
I just want to say I absolutely fully endorse the new recommendation to stop it now. So thanks.
Okay, so we'll move those recommendations. Sorry, I'll get a new seconder because you've seen the change. Councillor Morgan, any discussion, further discussion? All those in favour say aye. Those against no. I declare that carried. Okay, moving through to item 8 through to 11, which is the reducing of number of rates instalments. Now, before we debate this, one option, which I haven't had a chance to talk to officers on, is whether or not, and Jared, you may be able to answer this, through our light touch engagement, is this the type of matter we could put to our residents as a question to show if we were to go from 6 to 4, that would be a $50,000 saving. But of course, it would mean if you're on that payment, it would be larger lump sums. Or do we imagine that we're not looking to ask these types of questions through that process?
Through you, Chair. I would generally advise that this wouldn't be something to roll into an annual plan, a light touch engagement, but of course we can engage and ask that question in other ways through channels. The question would be on direction of elected members as to whether or not that would be a strategic question to ask ratepayers.
Yeah, without allowing some discussion, which, I mean, sorry, I will allow some discussion, but my gut tells me here there are going to be some strong feelings on this and quite a bit of unease without actually gauging people on it. That's what that was what my gut told me when I looked at it. But I'm happy to open it up for any discussion. Councillor Mitchell.
I'll kick the ball off with speaking in support of the motion. I think we just need to be really clear with our ratepayers that you can still pay your rates 6 times a year. You'll just get a bill 4 times a year, or however that works. So, people can choose. I think this is the important thing. People can choose how to pay their rates. Weekly, fortnightly with their pay, monthly, bi-monthly like it is now, quarterly, that they have that choice there, and they just need to know they have that choice of when and how they can pay their rates. And this is really just a change in a billing system. And it may send a signal to them when they see a bigger rates bill, because it's for a longer period of time. But also, we're sending a signal to them that we are looking to make savings in this annual plan process. And this is a fairly simple administrative thing we can do that doesn't really hurt anyone very much. They can still continue to pay their rates in the same way they do currently, but a saving can be made.
Councillor Briggs and Councillor Dyer.
Support Councillor Mitchell's comments, and just noting that if we were in any other organisation that wasn't political, governance wouldn't even be aware of this. It would be an operational decision that was made for clear efficiency, noting that we are in a political setting and that dynamic does change, and that's why we are discussing it. But I think, to even do any light touch consultation on it, our saving of $50,000 would be consumed by the process of going through the engagement, coming back for reporting, coming back to this table, having the conversation again. So to actually fully realise the saving, it actually just makes sense to support it today.
Councillor Dyer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Fully support the views of Councillor Mitchell and this. I would actually suggest going one step further and we just go straight to 2. I can't see any benefit of staying at 6. We've heard from council officers that they've changed to 2 and they've seen their benefits. It would be double the amount of savings a year. And we've also heard that there's also the unintended financial benefit of people changing from how they pay their bills to paying by direct debit, which saves even more money. We can encourage people to get their invoices by email, which will save even more money. If we're going to have the conversation, no matter what decision we decide on, 4 or 2, we absolutely have to nail the comms. And if we nail the comms, and it makes no difference whether we go from 4 to 2, people, as Councillor Mitchell has said, can still pay 6 times a year if they want to. They can pay daily if they want to. They can pay however they want. But the piece of paper they get in their mail will change, but nothing else will. But it's quite a significant saving. So I would propose that we actually go to 2.
Okay, if we go to 2, Councillor Dyer's face can be on the first invoice in July 2025. No, just kidding. Sorry, Councillor Barrett, then Councillor Brown.
Kia ora, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for that. And while I understand the rationale behind this, the people of the city won't. And I think once they see their rates instalment, they will not see a savings. They will see how much more that they're going to be paying on their rates instalment if we reduce the amount of times they can pay it. Well, maybe it is no more, but they don't understand that. A lot of people don't understand it. So I'm sorry, but I will have to vote against this.
Councillor Brown.
I think they'll be paying less, not more, but yeah, not everyone is the same. Not everyone is onto it. Not everyone sits like us and able to pay things. Some people will reactively pay towards their paper bill, even though it's no different. But I can't see why. We are in an environment of elected members, and the biggest thing hitting people with our relationship with them is rates. Why we would go to this at this point, I'm not sure. This is all part of comms. Even if we nail the comms 120%, 3/4 of the population won't receive that beautiful comms. They just won't, or they'll refuse to take it off. But if we're going to go to 4, then we might as well go to 2, because then we just jump right out of that reactively paying to your bill, because that is going to be the problem. I think either dip out and go to 2 or keep it as it is, because people will find reactively on their average in Lower Hutt, 48,000 a year, they'll find it difficult reacting to that paper, and some people do still pay to the bill. So I'm just noting there's different types of people who are on mortgages, different styles. I don't know why we would be doing this at this time.
Alicia, just one other question, and I think I may have asked this, sorry, in the pre-agenda, was that, is there an option, or is it just too complicated to say that if you were to have a mail-out bill over an online bill that it drops to 2 or 4, whereas if you're online, you could still get billed at 6? Because the main saving here is in the printing and mail.
I don't know that that's an option. In the rate setting process that you do on the 27th of June, you set by resolution the number of instalments, and I think they need to be the same number of instalments across the whole city. That's not a question we've specifically asked our external specialist legal advisors, but we can do that, but I'm fairly certain that it needs to be the same for everyone.
Yeah, my gut tells me that would be the case of how it works. Okay, now just before we have any more comment, what we can do here, of course, is ask for some more information to come back. Not that to relitigate the same issues, but I think there's been some valid points raised. If it was to go to 2, how much would that saving be? I mean, I assume it's 100,000, double. But if we could just look to bring this back with that feedback that's come from elected members in that context, and we can make a decision in February. Okay, is there any further direction, Alicia, that you would be helpful from members, aside from what you've already heard? No? Okay, Councillor Parkin.
Sorry, this is probably a question rather than discussion, and my thought is that we use the rates invoices to send out additional information from council. Are we cutting off our ability to do that because we cannot utilise the rates information to send out information separately to the rates?
I mean, you'd basically be reducing the amount of points. So if you went from 6 to 4, you'd only have 4 opportunities to correspond directly through the rates. It's a fair point. Fair point. Deputy Mayor Lewis.
Thank you. The point was made that Councillor Edwards raised about, if you receive a paper bill, if you opt out of it, it's going to be cheaper, whatever it is, that other people do, and that's outside of the rating policy. Is it still something that can be done by administration here as a covering letter?
I think the answer is that that'd be quite difficult, and it would have to be looked at separately if there's an additional fee. So I think that's one thing that can come back in February. Yeah. Okay. So recommendations here. My gut was right on this particular matter. 5. So 8 through to 11, and what we'll do is we'll just remove 9, and we'll just note we'll just have recommendation 8, which is noting, and then a new recommendation 9, which is, as per the discussion, officers to report back in February with further information for a decision to be made. So I'll move those. Do I have a seconder? Deputy Mayor Lewis, any discussion? All those in favour say aye. Those against no. Declare that carried. Okay. Now we're going to return back to 5A, which is the substantive paper from Jenny and the team. We're going to move straight through to table 4. Just checking our time. Okay, we're okay at the moment. Table 4, which is the unavoidable cost increase. This is on page 13 of your agenda. Now on these, I'll take it by exception. So is there any of the items which, well, there's only 2. So is there any one of those 2 that you would like to ask questions on? No? Okay. Yes, Councillor Dye. And what we'll do is we'll go through all of the tables, then we'll have the list of recommendations at the end. So, and then we'll vote on them collectively. Yep.
It's a question on depreciation. It was probably more high level, which could have been asked earlier. Previously, we've used the argument for depreciation as it's funding our renewals we're doing. Under the new asset revaluation and the new depreciation amounts, we're collecting about collecting about $50 to $100 million more than we're spending on renewals and depreciation. it's kind of flipped completely the other way. Will there be now a lag as we do the next LTP where our renewals will kind of overtake depreciation again? It just seems strange to be in a position where our depreciation and expense is actually more than we're actually spending on renewals.
Yes, I suppose there's a few different elements in here. So, the depreciation has been driven off the asset values and the life of the assets and so on, and the breakdown of the different types of assets and so on. So that's driving the depreciation. Renewal spend is basically off the back of the Wellington Water advice, and we know that, depending on which assets are coming up for renewal, that renewal program can vary over time. We also know that through the LTP process that Wellington Water recommended that we spend a lot more money on renewals, but that we should be, putting a lot more into renewal of pipes. But because of affordability challenges for the community, we went out for consultation and we agreed not to add extra, that higher level of renewal spend in. So, I suppose through the next LTP, it may well be that we choose to increase that investment in renewal spend, but I don't want to guess where that's going to land. But ideally, in the longer term, yes, we'd be following the Wellington Water advice and increasing the investment in the renewal spend. But there is obviously that affordability challenge that is in front of us.
Okay, so we'll move forward with the recommended option on these two items. Councillor Stallinger.
Just a quick, I suppose more of a comment than a question. Just on the second one, employee costs. Surprised to see we've had, the demand has gone up even further considering we had a big increase last round through the LTP. Could we have some figures on numbers? Because it sounds like we're increasing employee numbers again. I'd be keen to know by how many.
So there is a detailed paper with on page 36, there's a whole lot of commentary and analysis and so on explaining the various aspects of employee costs. If you're asking for FTE numbers, we can certainly get that through to you separately. I don't have it available now.
Yep, sound good? Okay. So we'll move forward with those two, moving through to table 5, which is budget matters for consideration. The first one we have covered off, which was the National Land Transport Program. That's item 5C. Number 2 is Silverstream Landfill. That's details on page 39 of the agenda. Is there any questions on Silverstream Landfill? Councillor Dyer.
Yeah, question on the asbestos cell now costing nearly $3 million more. When this first came to us, it was sort of sold to us as quite a good revenue earning thing for the landfill. Just wondering with those increased costs, is it still looking like financially this is going to be a good earner for the council?
Ewan, welcome.
To answer that question, ultimately all costs are recovered through revenue or through gate fees. So even though the asbestos cell will ultimately cost more, we can recover those costs through the increased charges at the gate.
But when it first came to us to be first signed off, it was making us, I think, $3 or $4 million profit a year that comes off the bottom line for our rates bill. Is that still looking like the case, or is it looking like that's costing more? Will break even, but might not have the relatively huge.
That was based on the gate fee assumptions at the time. And so, of course, they will have changed in the meantime. So across the board, the landfill, even though it's costing more to build and the gate fees are going up, across the board, it generates a net operating profit for council at the moment of about 15 million plus per year. And that will include the asbestos cell in the future.
Which leads into my next question on the landfill, that the financial predictions are that we're reducing that profit by $6 million over the 10 years. Just wondering if you've got any commentary on, obviously it's been an earner for the council. Are we looking, is it a decision to?
Yeah, so there's, I would frame it slightly differently. So when we say it makes less profit, it actually means that I mentioned just before that the net operating position for the landfill is about 15 million in OPEX per year in revenue for council. So when we say that waste volumes are starting to trend downwards because of various initiatives, whether that's food and green organics collection services or whether it's C&D diversion that we're working on towards implementing, it doesn't mean that there will be a reduced profit, a loss. It'll just mean that over time, that 15 million net operating position will reduce slightly. And it might not be 15 million, it might be 13 million. I'd have to go on the tables, but it's a slightly different way of looking at it.
Okay. Any other questions on this? No. Thank you, Ian. Tupua Horenuku, page 46. Okay. Happy with that? I think it's pretty straightforward. Councillor Mitchell?
Yeah, more just a request than a question. I had to ask a question in an earlier meeting of clarity around how the overspend was being apportioned between council and the Alliance. And just to note that in this paper, it's kind of in there, but it's still not very clear. It talks about a forecast final cost of 81.87 million. Then it talks about a forecast total project cost of 84.2 million, which includes the Alliance's share, and then it goes back to a total project cost 81.87. Just if and when we go out and communicate to the public about this, I think they'll want to know about the $84.2 million total cost, how much extra we're paying and how much extra the Alliance is paying. So more in a final document when this goes out for the public to see that it's really clear that there is a cost overrun. Some of it's been borne by us and the rest by the Alliance.
Through you, Chair. Thanks, Councillor. Yep, and noting that, so yeah, it is 50-50, but I noted it's not clear, and that's the total final cost is 84.2, but the over and above the original budget is split 50-50 with us, but we'll make that perfectly clear.
No, fair point, and I think Councillor Mitchell raised this earlier, so it'd be good to get that in the get that to come through. Okay. Now moving through Three Waters, we've covered that. Rating, we've covered all the others on the table, so we can move through straight through to table 6, which is rephasing work. Now I'm going to kind of try to do this by exception as well. So is there any questions on any of the items here? Councillor Mitchell, then Councillor Dyer.
Hopefully I'm on the right table. IAF budget rephasing. Just a question for a bit more detail around the funding at risk. It's in the appendix there, point 2, funding at risk. It talks about Kāinga Order has informed council it's seeking to reduce its contribution, and then talks about the balance being treated as at-risk funding, which Kāinga Order will consider requests to release to council. So just quite how that works compared to what I thought they were already funding.
Through you, Chair. So, Councillor, so we were funded for 3 pipes, but we only need 1 wastewater and 1 stormwater now. So that's, but we are working with Kāinga Order on ring fencing that funding and looking at options for its use, whether costs go a little bit higher, whether that can be kept, that sort of thing. So there's very minimal risk at this stage, but we're in those conversations with them.
So the 26.9 million, that's the cost of a third pipe we're not building, and we're asking for it maybe to be attributed to other things.
Through you, Chair. So yes, that is correct, but that is not enough for a third pipe. We don't need the extra stormwater, but should we need the third, it would be quite a lot higher than that.
Councillor Dyer.
Same question.
Okay. Any other questions on these rephasing proposals? No? Okay. So I'm happy to endorse the officer recommendations on them, 8 through to 14. So now we're just going to go to the capital project schedule in Appendix 3, page 160. This is recommendation 3. Is there any questions on that? Is anything generally? No? Okay. Now we'll move through to the rates revenue increases presented in section F, which is on page 23 of the report. And this really is looking to continue with what we set in the long-term plan. So that's the approach this is clearly proposing. Obviously, there are budgetary challenges which we're dealing with, but really this now is the time for anyone to raise whether it's a question or if there is more so rather than just a question, but a direction on the proposed rate increases. Noting, of course, that by if we were to significantly depart from our annual plan, that's when we get down the territory of having to do more than a light touch engagement. So there is a flow-on effect for any significant changes as well. Can I kick us off on that? I mean, my view is that while there are some cost pressures and budgetary issues, challenges that are coming up, as I think they have always done since I've been around the table for the last 14 years, I think it will be really important to ensure that we are able to stick at the rates increase which we have indicated in our long-term plan to be able to provide that certainty to our community. I think any increase above that is just unpalatable in the current economic climate. And I think that if there is, of course, any ability to find savings on the edges of that, then that's going to be something that council would want to look at. And I know that that's an ongoing exercise from officials as well, but I just want to be realistic that with some of the issues around even slight increases in bulk water levy charges and other things, these all have a cumulative impact around already having to work hard to keep that at 13.4, I believe, was it? Also, on the bulk water levy, so Jenny, do you just want to recap that for members and just any guidance on that?
Yeah. So we did get that information very late last week around the bulk water levy changes, and so it's not included in any of these papers as such. So basically, the impact would be a further 0.45% rates increase. So I suppose any direction and guidance from elected members today in dealing with that would be much appreciated.
Can you just remind us, is that an option? Is that optional, or basically we just have to wear that, or can we say no to the Greater Wellington?
Yeah, I think it's an unavoidable category, unfortunately.
So it's unavoidable. So it's an additional 0.45, and my view would be we would have to work hard to find what other savings to bring that rate increase back down to where it is, rather than just adding it on top. That would be my view. Happy to open it up now. You've sort of got a flavour of where I sit. But again, this is the opportunity. If we don't speak up now on these matters, it is going to be, frankly, too late in February once the train has left the station with this process. So I just want to be absolutely clear that now is the opportunity to raise any direction. Councillor Dyer?
Yeah, can we ask Regional Council to put it onto their rates bill that they send our ratepayers? Like, they send the rate bill to the same people for the same stuff. It feels like this figure always comes in very late in the picture where we can't really consider it. We can't say no to it. We have to fund it. It has to go in there. But they never give it to us with enough time to actually even consider it or how we're going to fund it. So I'd be quite keen to actually say, hey, you send an invoice through us, not by paper anymore, to our ratepayers. Can you just include it in your calculations you do? And maybe they might consider what the figure is a bit more if they know.
I think this probably comes up each time we get this, and I know that I understand the sentiment, but I wouldn't want us to waste any time on that. We're not going to set in separate invoices and start charging more when we've just had a discussion about how to save ultimately ratepayers' money. Councillor Mitchell?
Yeah, I just think in terms of the sentiment, though, there's an ongoing comms story of unfunded mandates, and usually they come from central government, but this is just another one that's coming through the system to us, and we do need to be upfront with our ratepayers. I think that these unavoidable costs are being loaded onto us after we've made our plans, actually, most of our plans, and where those costs are coming from, and that often they are unavoidable as well. Or, like with the transport one, we then have to make hard decisions about how we spend ratepayers' money to offset, underfunding from central government. So I think people really struggle to understand this stuff and think that we sit around this table jacking up their rates through the decisions we make, but quite a lot of it comes from decisions that other people make as well. So I think that comms challenge is still there for people to understand where these charges come from.
Councillor Edwards?
Yeah, I agree with you, Mr Mayor, that we need to stick to this 13.3%. But on the basis of your direction that speak up now or forever hold your peace, I wanted to voice my uneasiness or uneasiness about the Daly Street project that was outlined to us in a workshop last week. I think in the current climate, that's an unnecessary sort of a fringe sort of little project that I don't think we need to do. And in the same vein, although I admit I don't know enough about it yet, there's some aspects of the Petone Landings project, in particular a cycleway change down there, again, that I don't think is necessary in the current climate, and I think there might be some savings there, perhaps.
Thank you. And as Councillor Edwards has just done, very helpfully, if there are examples, that makes it very clear for the officers to come back. So those are two examples we can come back with some further advice on. Conscious of some of that may be in current year budgets rather than next year's budget. So just maybe a comment on that.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, both, all those ones are all within the current year.
There's also ongoing, sorry, I think from memory from the workshop, it was something like 400k for Daly Street in the current year and another 150k ongoing.
Through each year, so yes, so that's correct, but the wider activation fund was the ongoing element. So.
Okay. Well, what we'll do is we'll get some advice back on those two. This is the time to raise it, and I would want you to feel like you can do that, and we can have some advice come back. It may be more challenging for some things that are already mid-year or in progress as well. Okay. Any other direction on that, Councillor Stallinger?
Not really a direction, but given your lead into this vote right now, I think it's probably fair that I really need to make a comment, because councillors will remember I voted against the rates increase, which we're now looking to confirm again in this draft, possibly with an increase if necessary. I'm not looking for more information on the matters I voted against in terms of expenditure and challenged last time, because the majority of councillors voted the other way. So I don't want to make work where it's not going to result in a difference for this this committee. But the concerns I had back then I still have. I wasn't happy with the fact that between December last year and December this year we're looking to add 100 staff into our organisation, some 20% more. Given the pressures that we have, I didn't think it was a good signal or a good decision for us to approve that. I also voted against some quite significant capital expenditure in connection with the Riverlink, that the items referred to as streetscaping, although discussion with John, I imagine there's parts of that I would support, given the description perhaps didn't fully reflect what work was involved in there. So I guess what I'm saying, I'm still unhappy with the level of rates increases that we're proposing, and saw some areas where we could perhaps reduce that. Now, really, my mind is more captured by the cost of our water capex, and so I'm really looking to see the results of that. I still can't really explain how costs can treble, despite our officer giving us some good explanations which do make sense. The explanations he did provide, is kind of like a starter, I suppose, really, in fact, reinforce my views that we should be doing some things differently, because of our decisions. I don't mean just this council, but the region, in terms of, we want this much work done, we want that much work done. We need contractors to bulk up their staffing and machinery in the region, and then the next year we're saying no. If that's what's really driving to a large extent these large costs, treble what we used to pay, surely we can do something to remediate that or offset it. And so I'm really hopeful that as a result of the review that's going on, we'll get some significant savings in terms of that. Now, I know it's CapEx, but that does flow through to our depreciation and our interest costs. Those are the kind of reasons why I'm still not prepared to say, yes, these are the rates increases I want to settle on for the draft annual plan. I want to have a rethink about that and comment when the time comes.
Yep. No, that's fine. All I would say is just our eye on the prize, I think, really, while I agree that value for money piece is vital, should be our focus, is also the setup of this new entity and this new structure, because I think there's only so much we can do within what is clearly a broken Wellington Water, and those are words from the Chief Executive of what that set up. So how can we learn from that and make sure the new entity best serves us moving forward as well? But I think it's totally fair questions, and I'm really keen to see what sort of value for money piece of work comes back for any sort of pressure that may relieve. I suspect the challenge there is the scale of the challenge is so big that even if you were to find some savings, do things more efficiently, there is still more to do. But that's a worthwhile conversation us having. Councillor Briggs.
Just an opportunity, if there's any investor save options that the directors and the CE can actually see as well. I'm happy to review any opportunities in the new year, particularly noting that this annual plan won't be the only significant rates increase over the period of the next 10 years. And if there are options to invest now to reduce the overall cost over the next 10 years, happy to consider them with balance as well.
Yep. That's good. Any other feedback? Councillor Brown.
In the increased employee costs, I think most of them bounce back to decisions that we've made, like rangatahi, te tere Māori and so forth. That's some of the increases, but it's also got new refuse and recycling. What is that an additional cost in the last 12 months?
No, the commentary you're talking about is there's a graph over the last 5 years and it's telling the big picture story. So obviously when we introduced a new rubbish and recycling service, there was some more staff brought on to manage all the work, admin work and so on associated with that.
Okay, any other back direction? Councillor Shaw.
Just making reference to page 150, neighbourhoods and communities fee changes. Is that the time to bring that up here? Yeah. Okay. I've just got a little bit of a concern about the increase there above the 2.2% outlined in the LTP and intended increase for the use of these facilities, likely increase to be between 3 to 5%. I'd like us to have a really good look at keeping that in line with what the proposed increases are instead of going above that. The communities and the community hubs are such a wonderful place for our people, and it's times have been really tough. And I think, if we can just hold the costs on those instead of putting them up would be much appreciated by our community. And the other one that I have here is I oppose the increase in the learn to swim per head cost, particularly in light of the recent tragedy. We're really reliant on schools to bring their kids in to learn to swim. New Zealand's surrounded by water, and I just think that's a service we have to provide without increasing that amount.
Could we have advice come back on those two items into the new year? Yep.
Yep, we can provide advice. Obviously, if we're not funding through fees and charges, there's going to be an impact to rates revenue.
So those two. Thank you, Councillor Shaw, some really good specifics there. So Councillor Dyer, then Councillor Mitchell.
Yeah, just had another one on fees and charges. I don't know if it's a mistake, but the riverbank parking charges dropping quite a bit, and also the removal of the summer rate. We've just not heard anything about that. Just more information on those changes could come either now if you've got the answer or...
What we'll do is, because we were going to go through some of the fees and charges a little bit later. There's different recommendations. So if there's just anything else on that, we'll just hold that for now. But we've got Councillor Shaw's one. So just on particularly the rates side here. Okay, no, I think that's clear, and we will work on some recommendations before the end. So I'll move through to the targeted rates for wastewater and water supply. page, so that's on page 24. Okay. I'm going to just keep going. Considers targeted rates for waste, recycling, green waste. This is on page 24 as well, with that correction, which you'll have in front of you. Nothing on that. Okay. Fees and charges now. So, Councillor Dyer, did we catch? Sorry, what was your question again, Councillor Dyer?
The Riverbank car park monthly fee says that we're retiring the reduced pass over summer, and also the fees dropping quite a bit, whereas all the other fees are going up.
John?
Thank you, Chair. So, yeah, I'm not sure where that 53 came from, but that's not that wasn't something I'm aware of. So that I think the monthly pass for next year, all going well, the Riverbank car park will actually not be around next Christmas. So that's actually, the 53 shouldn't be there, should be just the commentary underneath it, the retire reduced pass for 25-26.
It says it's just reduced over the summer months, because at the moment we do a discount for summer. It's saying we're retiring that summer cheaper rate. It's not saying we're retiring the entire thing.
The bulk of the car park will be out. So we'll provide that detail early in the new year. But yeah, so there wouldn't be a reduced pass for most likely for Christmas, for December 25-26 and subsequent couple of years after that.
And the price drop there, is that to reflect that there won't be many car parks? So it's at a reduced rate, or is it a mistake? Or
yeah, the 53 shouldn't be there.
Okay, we'll just get that tidied up for papers in February. Okay. Happy to be Councillor Dyer on that? Yep. Councillor Mitchell.
Yeah, just coming back to one Councillor Shaw raised, which was the user fees and charges for neighbourhood and community facilities. In the appendix, it talks about two things: the impact of a slow economic recovery and increased costs above and beyond inflation, resulting in the need to increase the operating budget. And then talks about how the fees will go up. And the paper goes on to explain how we're expecting fewer users, so charging them a higher fee to hold the revenue at the same level. And the table on page 155 shows that the revenue is being held at the same level, no change. The bit about increased costs above and beyond inflation, resulting in the need to increase the operating budget. The tables on page 155 don't show any increase in operating budget. They just show a transfer between two different budgets. So I was just wondering if there is an increase in the operating costs or not, because the explanation is that there is, but the figures aren't shown there, unless I've misread it.
Do it. Yep.
Thank you. So there is an impact. So if you look at the activity levels, there will be an impact on costs for these particular areas. We can provide that information separately and show that increase.
Okay. Anything else on fees and charges? Councillor Shaw, then Councillor Edwards.
Page 116, I'm sure someone's got an explanation for me why cricket and croquet have a different recovery rate. That's the first one. And the second one is, I think, on page 118, it might be an idea to put in gym and swim membership per week fee. Otherwise, it looks a bit confusing to me. But anyway, first question, 116. Yeah, why there's a difference in cricket and croquet to all other sport?
Through you, Mr. Chair. That relates to the previous settings and the work that was done on sport and rec in 1994 that we discussed last year, I think or earlier this year when we had a briefing on that. So that's an historic setting, and it's something that we're looking to reset through the work that we're doing on sport and rec.
So that will come back to us. Yep. And the second question? Oh.
Sorry, the second question was just to a suggestion for gym and swim memberships. Yeah.
Yep. Apologies.
To add per week fee.
Yep. Sorry, that's my bad. Okay. Councillor Edwards.
Yeah, page 69, talking about encroachment fees, and when we're looking, to save $50,000 for sending out paper bills or not. This encroachment, a review of encroachment policy seems to have been on our books for Like, I seem to remember it was in my first term on council, we started talking about it. Yeah, I'm just wondering when I'm glad to see that fees have been put up in line with maybe inflation, perhaps. But yeah, where are we up to with this review?
I think Brad Cato looks eager to dig straight into it. Is that his reaction at the back there? No, sorry, Jared.
Through you, Chair. The review hasn't been prioritised as part of the Strategy and Policy Work Programme. It is still flagged on there. That'll be coming back to the Policy, Finance and Strategy Committee early next year, and elected members can make a decision on where it sits in the work programme, but it hasn't been in a position to be advanced in the short term.
Thank you. Councillor Stallinger will let us know that it was actually, 2005 it was first raised? Or?
No, I was just going to say it makes me very nervous because my recollection is it's a very fraught issue, and I did wonder at the time whether the benefits of a comprehensive review or change were worth, worth the cost and disruption from it.
I think I would share those concerns. So I think obviously we'll have that come through, but I'm sure that lens will be very much put over the information that comes through. Yeah. Okay. Anything else? No. Okay. Now moving through, we have. So we're agreeing in principle to run the light touch engagement. That's recommendation 9. Comfortable with that? Yep. And we've obviously gone through, as we were talking, particularly around the rates increase, if there's direction to any officers in regards to levels of service being reduced, or efforts or focus areas on that. Is there anything else that members would like to see come back? No? Okay. And is there any other guidance or direction members would like to debate or raise for officers? Catch-all. Councillor Dyer.
You said debate there, so I'm going to say it now because I feel like you're just going to cut debate off when the time is for actual debate. But yeah, it does still worry me that we're not meeting our own high bar for the balanced budget. But it worries me even more that we're not hitting the legislative balanced budget requirement as well. And I know the only way around this is to either spend less or put the rates up more, and neither of these are palatable given our backlog and our pressures to households on their finances as well. So I don't have the answer, but I do want it noted that I'm still very uneasy with this position.
Yeah, so fair point to raise in debate, but it's not really it's not a direction we can give with that. Okay, any other directions? Okay. So what we'll do now is just adjourn, and we're basically on 2 hours, which is great. We'll pull up. Okay. Okay. We'll take actually just 5 minutes because we do need to take a break anyway, and then we'll come back with the recommendations. Make sure we're comfortable. Thanks. Thanks, everyone. We'll get back into it. We'll throw the recommendations up on the screen. Okay, so the recommendations you can see with the edits. So I'm just going to go through them. Well, the one noting first recommendation, second recommendation, that's approving the budget matters as detailed in tables 4, 5, 6, and we agreed with all of the officer recommendations, so there's nothing else that needs to change there, and approves the budget increase from Greater Wellington Regional Council bulk water levy, and then we'll go to 3, approves the capital project schedules as detailed in Appendix 3. 4, notes the changes, you can see that. Number 6, approves the rates revenue increase presented in Section F of the report, and early direction to officers in the preparation of the draft annual plan is to retain 13.4% as the overall rates revenue increase, excluding growth. And what is that? I'm not quite sure. So the direction there is in essence to look to, through this process, to retain what we said we're going to do. Is that captured? Do people read that the same way? I'm not sure if the "and" in relation to Greater Wellington makes sense on the end. I think take that out because we cover that above anyway. Sorry, Councillor Shaw? Yep. 13.4 excluding growth. Yep, that's... Yep. Okay. Item 6, it's just approving. Item 7, the same. Item 8, the same. Alongside the additional requests for information which have come through. So, of course, those can be still looked at in February. And agrees to the light touch engagement process, notes the engagement process, and 11 is notes the direction to officers. Now that's those specifics that were mentioned, which we'll come back for further advice on, like as Councillor Edwards raised as an example. And item 12 is notes the further direction that we've provided through the meeting. So I don't think there was anything that was particularly needed to note down in the recommendation itself, but obviously the team have been capturing the feedback generally. Comfortable with those? Do they capture the meeting? Is there anything I've missed or not got quite right there? Councillor Stallinger?
Just to say with the rates one, as I indicated before, I'd have to vote against that one as it's worded. If it was just noting that this will be included in the draft for discussion when we next meet, I would be happy to go along with it, but over to you.
I mean, I'm happy to do that. I think the main thing I would want to be clear here, just so we're clear, is that there's not an expectation, or we're not saying come back with a 5% rates increase or dropping or increasing it. So I suppose maybe it's a noting that that's the direction we would give, is just making sure we're happy with that. And just so everyone's absolutely crystal clear that in February, the ship has sailed if you were wanting to see the rates increase come down significantly. I think that's the key thing. And I know some of you may feel that way, but it's individually, but of course there would need to be a majority around the table for that. Okay. Yep. So we can go notes. Yep. Just checking that we're comfortable with that. Yep. Okay, gives you what you need. Councillor Edwards.
Just a very quick question, and apologies, I didn't think of it before when we were talking about Cross Valley Link issues. Are we expecting some report on our options to do with the Ava rail bridge prior to us setting any sort of draft plan? I mean, we've got no budget for it at the moment, but will we have a report before we make decisions?
John?
Through you, Chair. Thanks, Councillor. we're still in discussions with KiwiRail around what that might look like. We can give an update report for February, but with some rough costings of what it may look like time-wise and dollar value. So we can have that for February if you wish.
And I think just with that report, you're probably already doing it, John, but just in context of the wider CBL program as well and that budget that's there. Yep. Okay. Councillor Parkin.
Sorry, follow-up question to John. I presume there's absolutely no way that KiwiRail can put off that renewal until we've got the Cross Valley link closer.
We asked them that exact question in our first letter. They've said no, that the work is needing to be done. That will come through as well in February. So, Councillor Stallinger, just got your mic on there.
Oh,
yep. Okay. Any other questions on those recs? Do we want to just pull them up again, Kate, if that's okay? So I will move the recommendations 1 through to 11. Okay, do I have a seconder? Councillor Edwards, any discussion? All those in favour say aye. Those against no. I declare that carried. And recommendation 12, can we add that in? Sorry, I've counted only 11. Yep. All those in favour say aye. Those against no. Declare that carried. Okay. Now we're on to questions. Received motions. And submission. We won't do here. Declare them closed at 47 p.m. And just have to close the